How Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young really came together, and the chaos behind it. Before the Harmonies changed rock music forever, there were drugs, broken memories, fragile egos, and one unforgettable night around a dining room table. Crosby, Stills, Nash, Young. 4 completely different men. 4 different record deals. 4 different versions of the same story. Ask them how it started, and you won't get the same answer twice. But they all agree on one thing: the music was undeniable. This isn't just the story of a supergroup. It's the story of how chance meetings, Laurel Canyon nights, stubborn personalities, and pure musical chemistry created one of the most important bands in rock history. 1. Laurel Canyon, Cass Elliot, and the beginning of everything. The late 1960s in Laurel Canyon wasn't just a scene, it was an explosion. Artists drifted in and out of houses. Doors stayed open. Guitars were always within reach. For Graham Nash, everything changed in mid-1968. He admits that was when the drug use began. Marijuana first, then eventually cocaine. He says he never imagined those choices could be deadly. Back then, it felt harmless. Experimental. Part of the culture. But the real turning point wasn't drugs. It was Cass Elliot. Mama Cass wasn't just the powerhouse voice of the mamas and the papas. She was a connector. A cultural force. Nash compares her to Gertrude Stein. She gathered musicians, writers, dreamers. She brought people together. And one day, she introduced him to David Crosby. That introduction would lead to Stephen Stills. And eventually, Neil Young. Nash has said plainly, had he not met Cass Elliot, his entire life would have been different. 2. The Dark Side. Crosby's confession. As the music grew stronger, so did the excess. Marijuana turned into cocaine. The Laurel Canyon dream came with shadows. Nash openly talks about how disturbing it was to write about David Crosby's drug years. One story nearly got pulled by legal teams. Crosby once sold his Mercedes for cocaine, then allegedly retrieved paperwork from a dealer who had died, and sold the car again for more drugs. When Nash told Crosby he planned to include it in his book, Crosby's response was simple: "Don't change a word." That was Crosby. Flawed. Brilliant. Honest about his demons. Nash says few people would have owned up to something like that. But Crosby did. It tells you everything about him. Both the chaos and the courage. 3. Who were these men, really? Each member brought something completely different. David Crosby. Jazz-influenced. Strange tunings. Unusual chords. A rare musical mind that operated outside normal structures. Stephen Stills, the leader. Relentless. A perfectionist. A multi-instrumentalist who wouldn't quit until it felt right. Neil Young, mysterious. Dedicated entirely to the muse. Willing to burn everything down if it meant protecting the integrity of the music. And Graham Nash. Even at 71, he admits there's a part of him that feels like he might still be found out. A kid from Northern England who followed his heart into music and somehow ended up in rock history. His father died at 46. That moment changed him. Nash realized the world doesn't stop when someone dies. The clouds keep moving. Birds keep singing. Time and family, he says, are all we truly have. That perspective shaped everything. The night the music clicked, but nobody agrees where. Now here's where it gets complicated. Ask them where Crosby, Stills and Nash first sang together, and you'll start an argument. Stephen Stills vividly remembers Cass Elliot's house. A rosewood dining table. Cass asking him and David to sing something they'd been working on. Nash standing nearby. He says it's burned into his memory like the day JFK was assassinated. Nash completely disagrees. His version. He had come from London to visit Joni Mitchell. Crosby and Stills were there. They sang at her place first. David Crosby sides with Nash. Stills refuses to budge. In the end, Nash writes in his autobiography, "This is how I remember it. Because we all have our truths." That's the fragility of memory. Especially when the moment is that powerful. But what they all agree on? The harmony. The second they sang together, something happened. And they knew it. 5. The quiet birth of a supergroup. There was one problem. They were all on separate record labels. 3 different contracts. 3 different companies. 3 different legal nightmares. So they kept it quiet. They rehearsed privately. Navigated delicate negotiations. No press. No entourage. When they finally entered the studio, they did it in secrecy. Because nothing destroys creativity faster than too many people in the room. Stephen Stills practically built that first album himself. He played lead guitar, acoustic guitar, bass, piano, almost everything except drums. The sound was layered, tight, and personal. But that created another problem. How do you tour with a man who played nearly every instrument? They needed another force. They needed Neil Young. 6. The decision to bring in Neil. There were doubts. Stills wasn't sure. Nash wasn't sure. Young wasn't sure. But Neil knew what they had. Stills remembers sitting outside Joni Mitchell's house when Neil pulled up, grabbed a guitar, and played 4 songs in a row. Some of the best Stills had ever heard. Decision made. Nash wanted to meet him first. They had breakfast in New York. After that meal, Nash said he would have made Neil king of the world. Neil was funny, confident, certain that his guitar, especially playing against Stills, would create magic. And he was right. Neil Young didn't join to fit in. He joined to challenge. And that tension became the sound. 7. Why they used their own names. There's a reason they weren't called something flashy. Not the Jetsons. Not Led Zeppelin. Not some psychedelic nonsense. They used their names intentionally. Because they never intended to be locked into one configuration. Crosby and Nash could record as a duo, Stills could go solo, Neil could disappear and reappear whenever he felt like it. The band was a flexible organism. It allowed spaced IT, allowed EGO'd IT, allowed evolution. And that flexibility is part of why they survived the chaos, at least for a while. 4 men. 4 egos. For different memories of how it all began. Drugs nearly destroyed them. Contracts almost prevented them. Personalities constantly clashed. But when they sang together, none of that mattered. Because sometimes music is bigger than memory. Bigger than ego. Bigger than truth itself. Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young didn't just form a band. They created a moment in time that still echoes decades later. And even if they never agree on where it started, they all agree on one thing. It was magic.
Thank you, my viewer. I hope you keep it here on my channel for more discoveries on all the celebrities' untold journeys. Like, comment, and subscribe on Hajararama channel. Thank you so much.